His Excellency Governor of Aruba, Her Excellency Prime Minister of Aruba, Island Governor of Bonaire, and his distinguished wife, His Excellency Minister of Transport, Integrity, Nature, and Elderly Affairs, Special Envoy to the Dutch Caribbean, Commissioner, Nature Portfolio Holder of Statia, Deputy Government Commissioner of Statia, distinguished guests, invited guests, members of the press, ladies and gentlemen, bon tardi y bon vini. Good afternoon and welcome to this Dutch Caribbean Nature Alliance Symposium with the focus on nature-based solutions for ecosystem restoration on the Dutch Caribbean islands. This event will provide a unique platform for the exchange of knowledge and experiences in integrating innovative solutions to preserve and rejuvenate the diverse ecosystems of the Dutch Caribbean. This symposium also boasts the attendance of several guests of honor, including Her Royal Highness, Princess Beatrix, patroness of the DCNA, and she will join us after the second break. This symposium is open for virtual attendance, and we are thankful to our in-person as well as our online audience for your attendance this afternoon. My name is Michelle Brooks, and I have the honor and the pleasure to serve as your Mistress of Ceremony and moderator for this afternoon's session. Before we proceed, permit me to share a few housekeeping notes with you. If you have not already done so, please place your mobile devices on silent. There are, as you can see, house photographers and videographers present, and they will capture and record all aspects of the symposium as well as the reception afterwards. All photos and videos will be published and made available for everyone. PowerPoint presentations from the presenters will also be published. I'm sharing this information with you so that you know there is no need for you to take your individual photos. And as a matter of fact, during the afternoon session, later session, when Princess Beatrix is present, we prefer no photographs be taken. And we thank you in advance for cooperating with us. We have scheduled 2 short breaks during the program, and we ask that you return to the auditorium promptly, because there will be no entry once we resume with the program. Except for a bottle of water, no food and beverages are allowed in the aula. Now that we've covered these important notes, I would now like to invite to the podium a gentleman who has the task of leading the Nature Alliance in the Dutch Caribbean. To officially welcome you this afternoon, the Executive Director of the Dutch Caribbean Nature Alliance, Mr. Arno Verhoeven.
Dear Excellencies, dear participants, partners, esteemed guests, and everybody who has joined online. On behalf of Fundacion Parke Nacional Aruba and the Dutch Nature Alliance, I warmly welcome you to our symposium on nature-based solutions. The islands of the Dutch Caribbean share a great variety of differences, but they also have a lot in common. Most importantly, their beautiful nature. Our living environment, our way of life, the island cultures, and their economies vitally depend on nature. These stunning ecosystems not only offer breathtaking beauty, but they also serve essential functions, such as providing income, food, recreation, and coastal and terrestrial protection. However, these systems, so important to our lives, are struggling. Our small islands face huge challenges due to constant pressure from human activities and changing climate conditions. Think of loss of biodiversity, runoff on reefs, or floodings and landslides. How do we find balance in our habitats again? How do we preserve and adapt? How are we going to deal with these challenges? As nature is clearly so important for the islands, it makes sense to start by seeking solutions in and with nature itself. Here is where nature-based solutions play a crucial role. Nature-based solutions, using nature and its features and processes to tackle the many issues. Not only to reduce the impact of human activity, but also to protect our habitats against extremities. What are these solutions? Why do they matter? And how can we use them? Today, we want to explore the possibilities and impact of these solutions on our ecosystems. Although the stakes are high and the issue is extremely serious, we prefer to look to the future with hope and with a drive to find true solutions. Let's not look at the scenarios of doom, but at what we can do, at the opportunities. Today, we have a great lineup of speakers who will share answers and insights. And we also have a panel and people from the field talking about their activities and experiences. Thank you again for joining us on our journey today. And I wish you all a great event and a good afternoon.
Thank you for those opening remarks, Arno. We definitely intend to have a great afternoon. I also would like to mention before we introduce our first speaker of this afternoon, we do have an online audience as well as all of you in person, and we will allow for Q&A after each presentation. During the course of the presentations, please feel free to make note of any questions that you might want to ask afterwards, but please keep in mind that time is limited, and if we don't get to all of you, do understand for us, but we will do our best to take both in person as well as online questions. Also, our keynote speaker unfortunately contracted COVID prior to his travel to Aruba. Therefore, he is unable to be with us in person. However, and thanks to technology, he is able to join us virtually, and we are very, very grateful for that. Our first opening, he's our keynote speaker for the opening this afternoon, and his name is Charles Carangua. He is a regional lead for forests, landscapes, and livelihoods programs for Africa at the International Union for Conservation of Nature, better known as the IUCN. He serves as country director for Rwanda office since 2016. He has led the IUCN work on land restoration in Africa as part of the Bonn Challenge and African Forest Landscape Restoration Initiative, where he engaged both governments and non-state actors to bring Africa's commitments to land restoration up to speed. As the opening keynote speaker, Charles will help us better understand what nature-based solutions are and how the IUCN supports this approach. Charles, are you with us?
Thank you. Thank you very much for that's very good introduction. I hope you can hear me.
Okay, great. So we're hearing you wonderfully, but we're not seeing you on the virtual platform. So if you could just give us a minute or so that our tech team can show us that handsome face of yours that only I can see right now.
I'll be on standby. Once the tech allows us, so you just go and start.
Thank you, sir.
Charles, did you share your screen yet?
Yeah, I have shared my screen.
All right. I'm not sure why it's not working, but maybe we have to do this. Yes, there we go. Right, Charles?
Yeah.
But we don't see him.
Oh, well, I have to trust that he's there. The floor is yours, Charles.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. All protocol observes, Your Excellencies. I'm very, very happy to join this symposium, which is very important, regardless of not have, of course, I had wished to be there physically, but I couldn't make it. But good enough, as our moderator said, the technology can still help us to talk together, and still I will join the symposium, even if I'm in Switzerland at the moment. So my talk this afternoon will exactly focus on the topic, and I like how the welcome from the executive director exactly put us into this perspective. Nature is the beacon, is the foundation of most of our life. We depend on it. And I will be coming back to nature-based solutions for society challenges. And my presentation will highlight not only the definition of this, but also how it helps us to address multiple challenges that we are facing. I work for IUCN, the world's largest environmental network organization, which I'm very, very happy to represent at this symposium. IUCN, as many of you may know, is an organization that is composed of members, but also commission and the secretariat, which I work for. And some of course, the alliance member are also members of IUCN, including the IUCN Netherlands Committee, which we appreciate very much their active involvement. Nature-based solution has just seen a journey for the last decade plus, from a concept to becoming today a widely used approach to conserve, protect, and manage nature in a sustainable way. It went through a lot of iteration, and IUCN, the organization I work for, has been actively involved in this particular journey by mostly participating in defining the concept itself, developing the subset in content of it, but also involving governments and members on jointly developing the standards of what nature-based solution could look like. Very recently, last year, the United Nations Environmental Assembly have adopted the definition of nature-based solution, which was a very, very big momentum after many parties, including governments and agencies, were questioning the concept because it didn't have what we call a multilaterally agreed definition. But today the definition is there, and the global momentum is still moving. And nature-based solution builds on decades of work. Most of people in the room will remember the time when ecosystem-based approaches were launched 20 years ago plus. And this has been one of the concepts which actually saw the birth of nature-based solutions, but not only ecosystem restoration approaches, but also issue-specific ecosystem-related concepts like ecosystem-based adaptation, ecosystem-based management, eco-DRR, disaster risk reduction, but also infrastructure approaches such as green infrastructure, natural infrastructure. So we look at the nature-based solution as an umbrella term covering multitudes of solutions. More importantly, it has significant potential to address our society challenges. We know what the world is going through today, the climate change. It's one of the major challenges, but also biodiversity loss, poverty, to name few, food insecurity in many countries, water security, human health issues. These are some of the challenges that nature-based solution can help us to address. There are a couple of benefits. Nature-based solution, if were implemented at scale, they could generate global benefits equal to 170 billion in benefits, focusing mostly on the climate. But also we look at 37% plus amount of climate mitigation potential if the world can embrace nature-based solutions. And most of this term saw really legitimacy after the UNEA 5 endorsed this definition. What is nature-based solution? They are actions to conserve, restore, sustainably use, and manage natural, modified terrestrial, freshwater, coastal, and marine ecosystems. There are another keywords here, is that we aim to address socioeconomic and environmental challenges effectively, adaptively, but also simultaneously providing human well-being and ecosystem services. So I think the key words here really are actions to restore, but also protect, sustainably manage, not only terrestrial, but all type of different ecosystems that we depend on. This definition, once it was endorsed by UNEA 5, we saw a big uptake at policy level. The Global Rio Conventions, all of them today have integrated nature-based solutions, from the climate to the biodiversity to the land, but also other multilateral environmental implements such as wetlands. We are seeing nature-based solution in the Global Sustainable Development Goal Platform discussions, in the national determined contribution, in national biodiversity, but also within the whole finance and investments, nature-based solution is taking a very, very rapid uptake. The global uptake of NBS also was the momentum because it helps governments, civil society, but also private sector to start widely applying and implementing nature-based solutions. Nature-based solutions have potential to catalyze action for sustainable development. This is equally important to consider in this decade as we strive to implement these SDGs. NBS have huge potential to help us achieve that. But what are we talking about here? What are nature-based solutions? We talked about addressing challenges, but also on the other side, NBS can provide long-term environmental, society, economic benefits. We talk about adaptation to climate change, sea level rise, flooding and landsliding that have been already mentioned, creating green jobs, increasing resilience of people, improving human health, and others that we can talk about. These benefits can only be generated if the nature-based solution is implemented with high integrity. These are just a couple of examples of nature-based solution. Protection or restoration of coastal ecosystem, which is part of the theme of this symposium. We can also talk about urban green and blue spaces. These are nature-based solutions. We can talk about sustainable land management practices, including agroforestry systems, but also rangeland management, to name a few. All these are just examples we can talk about. But what are the risks and blind spots that we may be looking ahead as the nature-based solution being uptaken by governments, investors, development banks, private sector? As you can see on my screen, does this come with a risk of misuse or greenwash? I think so. We need to carefully consider implementing and cherishing the integrity of these actions. And to allow that or mitigate those risks, IUCN have developed the global standards on nature-based solutions, which is available widely and can be applied by at different level, at different scale, in different ways. It builds on 8 principles, which I want to go through all of them, but key ones really include the nature conservation norms and principles. And also these principles are part of the ecosystem-based adaptation principles, which was endorsed by the UN Convention on Biological Diversity more than 20 years ago to strengthen and reinforce the biological and cultural diversity that we all depend on. But these principles saw the path of 8 criteria plus 28 indicators which compose this global standard. They'll come back to that. And it was developed in a very consultative manner. More than 800 people across 100 countries have been engaged, provided comments to this, and we saw it approved by the IUCN Conservation Congress in Marseille in 2021, though it was already approved by the Council in 2020. This is just an example of how it has been applied in one landscape, an ecosystem of this kind, a coastal ecosystem that was facing a lot of disaster risk issues, including flooding and overwashing. And the project that was developed there was assessed through the standard and proved to be a nature-based solutions. This is how it looks like when you apply that standard, the program design level, at a policy instrument level. You look at the standard, and this is a self-assessment process that can show you if you are really applying a nature-based solution or not. By doing this assessment, you give legitimacy to the claim, but also you are enforcing the integrity of nature-based solutions and avoid just calling everything nature-based solutions. IUCN in this endeavor to continue strengthening the uptake of nature-based solutions have recently launched an initiative, which is a global initiative to enhance nature-based solutions for accelerated climate and biodiversity transformation. This program aimed to achieve at least 1 billion vulnerable people, up to 2.4 billion hectares of healthy natural ecosystems, and significantly increase global mitigation efforts through protection, conservation, and restoration of carbon-rich terrestrial freshwater and marine ecosystems. In that efforts, IUCN launched the Global Hub, which I manage, I'm heading at the moment, and our objective is really to provide a facility and a platform which can support the uptake and acceleration of nature-based solution through these 3 stages, interlinked stages: designing, accelerating, and developing. You learn, you design, you implement, but also you catalyze uptake across different sectors, investors, and also policymakers. My final key message, I think it's important to recognize that nature-based solutions are now well established and need to be mainstreamed across policy domains, area of applications. The global standards of IUCN is available. It's a go-to tool which can benchmark, assess NBS to facilitate convergency, but also comparability of these nature-based solutions. Opportunities to accelerate nature-based solution actions for people, climate, and biodiversity is now, after it is now recognized in the Convention on Biological Diversity, in the Climate Conventions, in the Land Convention, but also is now part of the global discussions on the Sustainable Development Goals. I thank you very much for having me.
Charles, thank you so much for that presentation. I'm going to ask you to please stop sharing your screen so that we will be able to actually see you. Wonderful. Okay, everyone. Happy minutes. All right, so now is your opportunity to ask any questions that you might have for Charles. Charles, thank you for that wonderful presentation. I am not an expert in this area, so having to prepare to be your MC today, it forced me to have to do some research. And I've got to say, you are definitely one of the leading experts and someone that everyone in attendance today was excited about hearing from. So thank you again for your presentation and for being open to some questions. Okay, we'd like to open it up now for any questions that we might have from the audience and or those in person as well as those online. Do we have any questions in the audience itself? No questions from the audience? That's in person. And what about online? Okay, I am using my mobile device, FYI, because I've got to get fed the questions. We see a hand went up. Yes, if you could please stand. Would you like to use this one? Yes. Oh, those are not.
Hello, Mr. Karangwa. Thank you very much for your lovely presentation. My name is Amber van Weggel, and I'm a PhD candidate at the University of Aruba. I'm very curious, what were some major challenges that you had during all the work that you did?
Thank you. Should I go ahead and take that question? And it's really a brilliant question. I like that. A couple of things. Nature-based solutions, number one, was born out of an effort to consolidate conservation and development actions together. Remember, the history of conservation has just been focusing on nature and species, right? But the aspect of nature being a solution to the society challenges that we face every day has always underestimated in many ways. We never had the natural capital accounts before. We never talked about the contribution of nature to the economic development before. We never accounted that as part of our overall economic realms. And that already shows you how much nature was underestimated. Now, by bringing in nature-based solutions, the first challenge, of course, was to understand that joint efforts or that contribution of nature to different society challenges, being able to speak a language that nature can actually contribute to poverty alleviation, can contribute to significantly to climate change. And nature has always been overlooked as, it's just a good to have, less important. That's why it's the most vulnerable. That's why the biodiversity loss is accelerated. But nature-based solution brings it together, right? It starts now talking about, okay, we have challenges of flooding, but actually nature can play a big role in helping us to manage instead of doing gray infrastructure. We cannot build the water walls across our sea coastal line or likes. We can't. Nature needs to help us to manage the sea level rise. We cannot just build walls on all the mountains and hills because of landslide. Nature can help us to solve that problem. But that to be able to be understood, it took us a very long time. The second level of challenge was when we started talking about the standard. I think there's a lot of concepts out there which are very siloed across different ecosystems, and being able to help people to understand, we can bring that together from a nature-based solution point of view and agree on the standards and the criteria was also another challenge, but very, very good challenge to have. And it helped us also to refine, rethink, re-innovate all the way we have been looking at this particular concept. So, but yeah, good question, and happy to keep talking to that and share more resources.
Thank you so much for the question and for the response to the question. We do have a couple of questions that have come in online. Our next question for you, Charles, is how important are urban environments in their bigger vision of nature-based solutions?
Yeah, thank you. Let me talk about the statistics. I come from Africa, where 65% of the population by 2050, even before, will be living in the urban area. And that would definitely mean a big migration, which it happened in Europe and in other developed countries many, many years ago, would mean either we choose to do that sustainably with nature, or we just sacrifice nature to fill the city with buildings, like what happened, and then later we'll come back to reverse. So cities, the urban environment, in fact, it's a critical ecosystem that requires special attention because of many things. Number one, the concentration of climate impact happens in the city, and you need to cool the planet from the city where investments and people are living. And nature can only help us to do that. So nature-based solution for urban environment is very, very important. And one of the tools we have developed in addition to the standards is what it's urban nature indexes, which helps us actually to implement nature-based solution within the urban context. The second is that when you look at the development, generally from industrialization to big investment happens within the urban context. And importantly, by bringing the nature-based solution as part of that process, you have a more chance of making that urban environment more resilient to different shocks. That includes flooding and other problems that happens in many cities, including also warming in cities, which affects many people's health, etc. So it's really an important concept, and in fact, we do see now a big uptake of urban nature-based solution investment compared to what used to happen previously, including big banks started now talking about urban investment with nature, and which was not there before. So it's quite an important aspect as we look at the urban and the whole urbanization process across the globe.
Thank you for that response, Charles. And you speak about seeing an increase in urban environment investments. There's a question that asks, does the NBS or nature-based solutions process require investment into local biological research?
Indeed, I mean, this concept is quite new, even if we say it has been there for the last 12, 15 years. So there's still a need to understand more. What does that mean for different sectors? What does that mean for different processes? What does that mean for agriculture? We were just in a meeting recently where a country said, yeah, we think biofertilizers are nature-based solutions, but we need to do some more research to understand, is that really a nature-based solutions? We still need to understand, based on the criteria and the standard, how different processes can be or cannot be nature-based solutions. So I think it's a very relevant point. And in fact, there is quite now a significant investment in research focusing on nature-based solutions, because the globe don't want to be misled by just a good narrative, but we want to understand how best the research can inform the scale, but also the action on nature-based solutions.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much for that. Charles, the time is up. And we want to once more thank you for being our keynote speaker for the opening of this afternoon's symposium. We are very, very honored to have had you as our opening speaker. And we do hope that you'll be able to stay online with us for another couple of hours. Will you still be joining us? Oh,
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. And I will stay up, of course, for another 1 or 2 hours. So I respect my doctor's advice to sleep early with my COVID.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. Thank you again. Please, everyone. If you were here, you would be getting a very warm hug from your Aruban people, but you're not, so we will send it to you virtually from Aruba to Africa. All right, our next speaker is now preparing to join us at the podium. Her name is Natasha Silva, and she is the Chief Conservation Officer at Fundacion Parke Nacional Aruba. We all might know it as FPNA. She's a seasoned leader and strategist with a passion for nature conservation and sustainability. During her presentation, Natasha will share what some of the conservation challenges are in Aruba, and she might also touch on some of those challenges in the Dutch Caribbean as well. She will speak to us about how the FPNA is approaching these challenges. Please help me welcome Natasha Silva. Yes.
Just click the right
Yes.
one. Protocol has been established. Buon tardi, good afternoon, everyone. I have been asked to present to you in less than 15 minutes the importance of our incredible biodiversity, the numerous challenges that we as conservationists face on a tiny Caribbean island like Aruba, but also the opportunities we see amidst and despite these challenges. Did you know that the Caribbean holds numerous nature records? The world's smallest bird, 5 centimeters large or tiny, the bee hummingbird. The world's smallest snake, only 10.8 centimeters small. And then we also have the world's smallest lizard, a dwarf gecko, 16 millimeters small. And as more and more species are identified, world records are being broken thick and fast. So as conservationists, we are often asked the question, why should we care? Why does nature matter? Well, the Caribbean islands support an incredible biodiversity within its terrestrial ecosystems with a high percentage of endemicity. And endemicity means that species occur in a specific geographical range. And they're usually confined to a single area. So that makes this region one of the world's greatest centers of biodiversity. Did you also know that the Caribbean is in the top 6 of the world's 36 biodiversity hotspots? So biodiversity hotspots make up less than 3% of the Earth's land surface and refer to regions that are both rich in life and at a high risk for destruction. Biodiversity hotspots are by definition in a conservation crisis. To be classified as a biodiversity hotspot, a region must have at least lost 70% of its original natural vegetation, usually due to human activity. So the ABC Islands, St. Martin, St. Statia, and Saba stand out within the Kingdom of the Netherlands as the most significant biodiversity hotspot. The Caribbean is also a hotbed for endemism. But endemism is a double-edged sword. While an animal is well adapted to life on its particular island, this does make it very vulnerable to environmental change. And with the 35 million strong human population on the Caribbean islands growing at a rate of 2.5% each year, change is inevitable. So Barbados, St. Martin, and Aruba are not only among the most densely populated islands within the Caribbean, they also are amongst the most densely populated islands or countries in the world. I will not go through the entire list, but I hope you have scanned and are impressed by how amazing the Caribbean really is. So Aruba's biodiversity is also unique. It's surprisingly rich despite its semi-arid environment and being heavily impacted by centuries of human activity. On Aruba, there are 34 endemic species that occur only on Aruba and nowhere else on Earth. There are also 28 species that the ABC Islands share together. And there are 37 species that the ABC Islands share with a part of Colombia and a part of Venezuela. Now, Aruba is truly unique. I don't know if everyone realizes that. So we also have 10 species of tern that together nest on our islands, our reef islands. And this is probably the only place on Earth where 10 species of tern nest together. Our reef islands are breeding grounds to approximately 25% population of the Cayenne tern, 90%, and that was the global population of the Cayenne tern, 90% of the Caribbean population of the common tern, and 25% of the Caribbean population of the black noddy. It is special, believe me. A further 4 species of sea turtle nest on our beaches, of which we know from the research done on the leatherback turtle, that Aruba brings forth a higher ratio of male turtles, supplementing the higher female ratio on the other islands. And there are 7 species of bats that call Aruba their home, not only insectivorous bats, but also frugivorous bats or nectar-feeding bats. And together, these bats do an amazing work, because without the nectar-feeding bats, we probably wouldn't have as many cacti on the island, which make Aruba so characteristic. But also, did you know that the insectivorous bats eat around 600 to 1,000 bugs every hour? So they help us. So, okay. This incredibly cute bird is the crested bobwhite, known locally as the patrici. During my youth, they were a more common sight on the island than they are today. Together with the conejo, but for most of the youth today, they are an unknown species. They have declined and retreated to the margins of our island. And that brings me to the phenomena of which we conservationists have to deal with, and that's called shifting baselines. And shifting baselines refers to the changes in our perception of what is considered normal or natural over time, and particularly in the context of environmental conditions. This concept is relevant to conservation because it highlights how our expectations of what is healthy, what healthy nature looks like, changes over generations, and often without us really being fully aware of it. If each generation grows up with a slightly degraded environment but considers it normal, then there is a great risk of accepting lower levels of biodiversity as the new baseline. This can lead to a gradual decline in species diversity over time, as many people do not recognize or even fully remember the extent of the losses. So if each generation accepts a slightly degraded environment as the norm, future generations will have a lower expectation of what a healthy environment should be. And this can create a cycle of declining environmental quality over time, but also declining biodiversity. So by recognizing and addressing these shifting baselines, conservation efforts can work towards maintaining or restoring the health and resilience of ecosystems for future generations. I am just going to skip through this very briefly, the next slide. This is just to impress on you, if we're talking about conservation challenges, the challenges of FPNA. We have increasingly protected areas brought under our management, which we are very grateful for because they need to be protected. It does mean that in a few years' time span, we have gone from only Parke National Park to the entire island as our base of nature conservation. So that gives organizational challenges, but we will catch up. We are an ambitious bunch. So within these areas, we also have very unique areas. We have 5 key biodiversity areas, and these are sites which are significant to the global persistence of biodiversity. We also have 4 IBAs, 4 international bird and biodiversity areas that are wetland areas of international importance according to the Ramsar Convention. We also have 4 marine protected areas, legally designated as multi-use, but considered KBAs as well, key biodiversity areas. So in our transitioning as a conservation organization, we are now looking beyond our protected boundaries and management areas, as nature knows no boundaries and is interconnected regardless. So anything happening beyond the borders of our management areas has impact on the protected areas and vice versa. So if we look at Aruba's ecosystem services, these are the services that nature provides us as human beings. They are exceptional. And Aruba, even though most people will say there's not that much nature out there, it's still out there and it still does help us as human beings. So if we look at how many ecosystems we have on such a tiny island, it is mind-boggling. 17 ecosystems that also provide habitats for for our great biodiversity. And the services that are supporting, provisioning, regulating, but also cultural, aesthetic, which is often forgotten. Nature is also part of our cultural identity. So if we move on to the threats, these are numerous, and these are only for Aruba. And I think the list is increasing. So I will just briefly name them to impress on you the challenges that we as a conservation organization have to deal with on a very regular basis. climate change, population growth, unsustainable tourism, high impact recreation, unsustainable food resourcing or harvesting, urban development, coastal development, private properties and leased land in protected areas, land clearing, invasive species, feral animals, quarries, landfills, all kinds of pesticides, herbicides, insecticides, solid waste pollution, water pollution by chemicals, sewage pollution, marine pollution. I'm sorry, my screen is covered, but I can't read it anymore. I see noise pollution, light pollution, air pollution, soil degradation, and also trash, which I'm sure you've seen as well. So we are operating in a changed landscape. The landscape and vegetation as we know it on Aruba nowadays has changed drastically. So before we look to the future, it is important to briefly pause and understand which processes shaped our island and its island landscapes and got us to the point where we are now. Since the 1500s, during the centuries when wave after wave of colonists followed Columbus, at least 38 species are known to have disappeared in the Caribbean. In Aruba, the environment began to be impacted during the pre-colonial era with the first Indian settlers in fishing and farming communities with slash and burn practices, cultivation near the villages, which also led to contained deforestation in the areas surrounding their villages. During the colonial era, free roaming herds of grazers were introduced, cattle, goats, sheep, cows, and horses were established, and wood was harvested and exported to Europe well into the 19th century, followed by the modest production of export commodity lime, which decimated mangroves, as mangroves were needed to burn the kiln ovens. At one point in time, 1/3 of Aruba was cleared for aloe cultivation, and numerous agricultural initiatives were undertaken, and by the 20th century, the countryside became barren. And much of the former agricultural lands were abandoned. And there was also been periods of drought. Many farmers went to work in the oil refinery, and the goats were left to roam freely and graze the remaining vegetation on the island. So let's move to a different level, back to a higher global level. All right, I got the yellow cards. Okay, I'm gonna go fly through a few slides. So we're now currently in a triple planetary crisis. Climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution are running havoc. We are all feeling the impacts of it at an individual level even. So if we look at the regional nature loss, I was just discussing it at the biodiversity level, but at this level, regional, you'll see that we have lost 94% of the original nature in our region. It's extensive. And if you look at the largest cause of this loss, it's actually changes in land use, habitat loss, and degradation. The 7 major societal challenges which we are faced today was already discussed briefly in a previous presentation. Nature-based solutions are a tool that we can apply to our standard conservation work that we are already doing at the moment. It gives many, many benefits. I will not name them now, but it also has some aspects that are clearly not considered within nature-based solutions. Okay, so if I go back, Arno already named a few aspects of what nature-based solutions can mean to us as conservationists. There are numerous projects and programs in which can be invested, in which you find a win-win situation for nature to tackle all the nature threats, as well as have a win for humans. They include protecting and restoring coral reefs, which gives many benefits to humans, restoring native vegetation, which leads to environmental restoration and also helps humans indirectly. Restoring wetlands and created constructed wetlands helps us in combating climate change, carbon sequestration, and I can go on. But we can also look at other ways of using or applying nature-based solutions. For example, restoring the natural watershed, creating riparian buffer zones. So those are zones alongside rivers, for example. investing in sustainable agriculture and land use, integrating nature within that. And also, as was discussed before, integrating nature in not only a green urban infrastructure, but also blue urban infrastructure. It gives us many benefits in combating the 7 societal challenges that we face today. So what does our sustainable future look like, seeing that the natural environment has been impacted by millennia of us being here and will still be heavily impacted? But for most of the 20th and 21st century, decision makers treated nature as a peripheral to national and global agendas. At best, nature was considered a worthy cause, and at worst, it was an obstacle to development. However, we are now increasingly coming to understand the importance of nature as the basis of our economy and as an essential basis for human existence and well-being. So failure to recognize this is not only the results in a model, economic growth model that actively destroys nature and its services, it also misses the opportunity to effectively deploy nature in helping resolve major societal challenges, such as climate change, food security, and disaster risk reduction. Yes. This is my final slide. I will end with this. Hence, we need to change our relationship with nature to one which emphasizes interconnectivity, interrelations, and the well-being of the whole. Thank you.
But we have Q&A, so you're not done yet.
Okay, I'm
Here. All right. Stand right here, and you can stay close to the podium. And okay, she did well, didn't she? Aha, represented. Our small island nation has a lot of small animals, right?
Yes,
But we've got
but
the
very
small,
interesting ones.
very interesting. Smallest snake, really?
Well, in the Caribbean, yes, and we actually do have a very tiny snake, and I think most gardens will have this snake without you even realizing it. They do good work because they eat termite eggs and little termite larvae, and also they tackle the ants, so keep them there.
And I believe at the front row here, they were having a little conversation about the bats that eat the bugs. So, I mean, do they help by eliminating some mosquitoes?
Of course. So if you look at nature, nature is in a pristine state, a very balanced system. And you will have everything working in synchronicity. If you have food, you'll have food eaters, and the bats love bugs. So yeah, keep bats, you'll have less bugs.
Yes, it's a perfect balance, perfect balance. Okay, do we have any questions in the audience? Because I've got my own questions, but it's not about me. Are there any questions in the audience for Natasha? All right, I see someone here in the front. Nina will come and bring you a microphone. If you could stand up. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Janske van de Krommenakker, Vogelbescherming Nederland. Natasha, thank you so much for the interesting presentation you gave and more for the great work you're doing. My question is about the shifting baselines. So apart from the conservation projects that you're doing, are there also other ways you think you can remind the future generations of, well, that the standards of nature, what normality in nature were higher?
Yes, thank you for that question, Janske. It is something that bears upon us heavily as conservationists. Our organization is overstretched like all nature conservation organizations are, but it's unfortunately something we pay the least attention to because we're always dealing with urgent conservation issues. But awareness, driving awareness is key, a key aspect of conservation. And to tackle shifting baselines, I think we really have to revalue all our culture, I would say, and go back to our elderly people and sit down under the tree and talk to them. Let them remind us of what it used to look like and their nature experiences. And if we can document these, that will already help us. And this can supplement further scientific research done. So you have a beautiful array of evidence that you gather, but it needs more attention. It also needs more funding.
She's got to get that plug in there. Needs more funding. But I love what you say, that we need to spend more time sitting under the tree and speaking to those who have come before us and who have paved the way and laid the foundation
Right.
so that we could learn how to do it better. Thank you for that answer and for the question. Thank you. Are there any more questions in the room? Yes, back there.
Hi, Natasha. Very nice presentation.
Thank you.
Because a lot of previous generations saw development as a way of progress, and now we kind of suffer from the consequences. You mentioned a list of threats on screen, and you also mentioned that we need to invest in solutions.
Yeah.
What we see a lot of times are a lot of investments happen on a micro scale. So how would you prioritize these threats, and how would you prioritize the opportunities? Where would you like to invest the most in?
Yeah, so the list I showed, thank you for the question, which is not an easy one, but the list I showed is a very daunting list. And indeed, we always say, as a tiny NGO, we cannot save the world, and we certainly can't save Aruba. So this is certainly something that you have to do together. As FPNA, what we're doing actually next week, Lawrence will be helping us. We are going to set our conservation priorities for the coming 10 years. And within setting those conservation priorities, we will especially look at actually what has the biggest effect. So if we only have so much time and energy, we have to focus on the priorities with the biggest effect, the ones who will bring about the most positive change, and it has to happen rapidly. So yeah, it's working together. We work very hard, and it's certainly something we have to do together. So the more people become aware, I think the more we allow ourselves to have discussions and dialogue, I think that's already a useful start, and share our knowledge, but not only share our successes, also share our failures. It's really important to learn from each other and to learn from what things go wrong so that we can become increasingly better in doing our work.
Great answer. Great answer. She should get an applause for that one. So I'm going to say something to lead into a question that came in from Michelle Force da Costa Gomez online. But you mentioned, Natasha, you mentioned, we've got to focus on the priorities, right? So the question is, what is the most urgent issue to pay attention to now in Aruba in relation to conservation, and what measures need to be taken?
Whoa.
I know,
Thank
right?
you, Michelle.
It wasn't me.
So I think, yeah, I'm gonna say something. I think we need more protected nature, to be honest. If we're gonna go to 2030 by 30 by 2030, but yeah, 30 by 2030, we need to up our game. There was a really famous scientist who's no longer with us, A.O. Wilson, who talked about the 50%, in which he said actually 50% of the planet should be protected to be able to sustain our populations into the future. But protection is one. I think the most urgent one is shifting our mindset, shifting our worldview. If we can, and that is not an easy task, shifting, and everyone else will start contributing to making a better future.
Great. Thank you so much, Natasha. Thank you. Natasha, we're going to give one more question to an online individual. Well, it's a organization called O4IA Architecture. And the question is, how can urban areas like parks and tree-lined streets contribute to the goal of restoring and sustaining our biodiversity?
That is actually a simple opportunity that can be done quite easily. If we're looking at for example, we already have an NGO that is growing a lot of native trees and plants. And this can be incorporated into our urban infrastructure quite easily. So if you switch all the non-native trees for native trees, you are creating already biodiversity. So also looking at the concrete areas, a lot of it is just habit and is not necessary. So removing a lot of the concrete will reduce the heat of the urban environment. It also allows you opportunities to put plants in the place, put in endemic species. The endemic species are the habitats for native flora, fauna. So you are already doing that. One important thing also in an urban environment is to create connectivity. So make sure that you're not only creating patches of green all over the place, but see if you can connect these patches in some way with tiny green corridors that allow species to move between the patches.
Wow. Wow. Very, very interesting. Natasha, we thank you for presenting this wonderful, excellent informational details to us this afternoon and for responding to all of our questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you all so much for your active attention so far in our program. We are going to call for a very short break of 10 minutes. So in the foyer, there are refreshments. We ask, please, that when our staff members ask you to come back inside the auditorium, that you do enter promptly. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for your prompt return. Thanks. Thank you so much. Our third presenter of today's symposium is ready and raring to go. During his presentation, our next speaker, Mr. Arksen Alders, will discuss possible financing mechanisms for nature-based solutions and how Grant Thornton designs conservation financing solutions. Arksen is a senior consultant in advisory at Grant Thornton Bonaire, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome him now to the podium. It's all yours.
So what's the?
Mhm.
Good day, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Arksen Alders, Senior Consultant at Grant Thornton, and I'm happy to be here today to talk a little bit about resource mobilization for biodiversity. I'd also like to mention that this presentation is a nice collaboration between Grant Thornton offices of Aruba, Bonaire, and the Netherlands. Is this better? No? It needs to be higher. Okay, this is, maybe it's best if I try and hold it in my hand. Okay. All right. Okay, this is better. Yes, all right. I'd like to start off. It's not working.
Can we have a clicker back, please? There you go. Thank you. Okay, Arksen, you can.
Okay, take two. I hear myself echoing now. Yeah? Okay. So, all right. To start off, I'd like to revisit part of the background, part of the reason why we're all here, which is the biodiversity crisis and the biodiversity financing gap. Personally, this is one of the statistics that have struck me the most. That almost 70% of wildlife populations have declined in the past 50 years. This is a problem. Why? There are numerous reasons, but one is that more than half of the world's GDP is moderately to highly dependent on nature and nature services. So what are we doing about that? What are we doing about the financing gap? But first, let me summarize the financing gap in a nutshell. We're talking about a gap of about $800 billion annually. Right now, the current financing stands at about 140 billion annually. So there's still a long way to go globally. So this brings us back to the topic at hand, resource mobilization for biodiversity. How do we address the gap? And how do we achieve increase the sums being mobilized? I would like to approach these questions from two angles. First, a scales perspective. I think it's important to think about resource mobilizations from the context of 4 scales: local, landscape, national, and regional. I'll talk a little bit more about this in the upcoming slides, and they will also inform the structure of the rest of my slides. In addition, the second is what I think are some of the core objectives for better resource mobilization. The first one is especially honed on the local level, which is building an evidence-based case for biodiversity. I think previous speakers have elaborated on this point. Second is diversifying sources and finance mechanisms. This holds true for all the 4 levels. And the third one is eventually, with all the analysis and data gathered, it then becomes easier to design a sustainable finance model. So let's start by looking at the local level. There exists a wide range of financing mechanisms that can be implemented for a protected area. So this goes beyond donations, beyond grants, and also beyond government subsidies. Let me summarize this into 4 categories. Taxes dedicated to park area conservation, usually government-backed. Donor funds, we're talking about larger institutions such as conservation trust funds and large NGOs. We're talking about donations. These are mostly individuals, businesses, smaller NGOs. And fourth, the application of fees and sale of merchandise, which many protected area managers are already applying. Protected area benefit from having a diverse mix of these finance mechanisms. It lowers risk. Think about external shocks such as COVID or the overdependency on tourism. Point being, the unique context of a local setting is very decisive in getting to which types of finance mechanisms are opportune and can be implemented. Let me talk a little bit about the context-specific case for biodiversity. This is a simplified schematic based on coral reef ecosystem management and dive tags. Why are context-specific cases so important? Let me give one very basic reason. You want to gauge the difference between the value of benefits that people derive from ecosystems and what people actually pay for these services. If stakeholders accord a higher value to ecosystem but pay less than that, there's an opportunity to design a finance mechanism there. The idea is that beneficiaries should contribute to nature conservation, and it's about identifying which beneficiaries are contributing too little or not at all. And this then becomes a basis for, again, designing a finance mechanism. Let's go to the last, let's move on to the landscape level. But what do we mean by landscape? As opposed to a protected area, landscape have a larger scope that involves a multitude of stakeholders, not just nature conservation. These stakeholders have a role to play in the successful conservation of a landscape, and each have different types of financial needs. Different financing mechanisms can be identified for different types of stakeholders in the landscape. And any financing strategy must try to integrate these different needs and financing instruments. This is an example of the Gola forest in Liberia and Sierra Leone. And I don't want to dwell on all the list of the financing mechanisms, but point being the needed integration when you approach conservation from a landscape perspective. Let's go to the last two scale levels, national and regional. So I'm taking Costa Rica as an example. They committed to protect 30% of their waters by 2030. And the central question that follows are, what must additional finance, what must be financed, and how much will it cost? In the case of Costa Rica, the bottom line is that the previously set 2.9% was already underfinanced. Taking the 30% as a point of departure then, of course, implies that that financing gap has become even bigger. So what does Costa Rica do about that? What is their approach? I have 3 points. They are intensifying, for example, their international cooperation, their cooperation with international funds. They're embedding finance mechanisms into legislation, and they are engaging into and creating new public-private partnerships. And let me zoom in into that last point, the PPPs. Again, 2 examples. On your left side, a national example, Costa Rica again. On your right side, a regional example, the Med Fund, covering the entire Mediterranean area. What both have in common is that they have a diversified set of donors working together for different areas within that landscape and different stakeholder needs. So I'd like to close off with a slide that you've already seen. That's because I think these objectives are at the same time also the takeaways for my presentation. So first and foremost, there needs to be an evidence-based case for biodiversity on a local level, which focuses on ecosystem services, their characteristics, finance mechanisms based on local beneficiaries. Second, diversification of funding sources and finance mechanisms should be pursued across all levels. Regarding the local level, think back to the list of finance mechanisms shown earlier. This is a very much a bottom-up approach to financing streams, right? Conversely, the national and the regional perspective informs us of a more top-down, institutional type finance stream through donors, CTFs, and other intermediaries. Lastly, the objective to design a financing model, I think it's sufficient to say that the better the previous two targets are aligned, the better financing model is created. And a resource mobilization strategy is a very helpful tool. In any case, a good point of departure for achieving this. So now we've come to the end of my presentation. I thank everyone, and I'm also looking at Michelle, whether I have to open the floor for questions or wait a second.
Yes, we had to first wait for the applause. Thank you so much, Arsen. We do have an extra microphone, do we, for Arsen? Yes, please, for Q&A. You did good.
Thank you.
Yes, yes, yes. And you can stand right here, center stage, in the spotlight. Yes. Is it working okay? I guess I should use this one. Even though I do have a big voice, and I'm pretty sure you can all hear me at the back of the room, even without the microphone. Okay. Yes, have him use this one? Okay, that's great. Any questions for Arts? Oh, hand went up like, oh, okay. Are you ready, dude? Are you ready? I hope you're ready because they're ready for you. Okay, I'm gonna take this out because I want to make sure that you can comfortably answer all the questions. Nina, who has the microphone?
Testing.
Yeah, this one's done.
Yes, and that's the bottom-up approach I was briefly trying to explain. So the way that more localized grassroots organizations can diversify their funding, become more resilient in that aspect. That's another case. You have to look at the local ecosystem services and the beneficiaries, the stakeholders, people who use them on the spot. And that's your basis for getting to logical finance mechanisms and finance streams. So from bottom to the organization itself. No. Yeah.
Thank you. My name is Norman Duperi. I'm with the Fundacion Parke Nacional Aruba. My question is, could you give an example of the finance mechanism legislation that you just referred to? Thank you.
No, I can't actually. I know that Costa Rica has done this, and I know that my colleagues have worked with organizations that have been designing and working together with the government to get this achieved. But I'll be happy to come back to you after this symposium to talk about that if you'd like. Yeah.
Yes, good afternoon. This is Manfred van Veghel from Kamabi, Curaçao. If I think about nature-based solutions, money finance, I think that money finance is part of the problems we are in right now. But thinking about money and nature, what would be the equivalent of money in nature? Do you have any idea? Because I haven't got the slightest clue.
thank you for your question, sir. Could you clarify that question again? Because it ends with, what do we think about money in nature? I can appreciate this question, but I think it's a very philosophical one. And I would like to underline what the first keynote speaker talked about, that we're finally at a place where accounting is incorporating nature value. And that's a step forwards. It's not, so in essence, it's including nature in our economic frameworks, yes. And you're questioning whether it should not be the other way around. Well, that's I think a question for a symposium all on its own.
Audience. So I'll just go ahead and ask one of those questions to Arxen. On what scale level should we think about sustainable finance when it comes to the Dutch Caribbean?
All of them. The Dutch Caribbean Nature Alliance, to take that as an example, oversees 6 islands. These islands have local nature organizations. They have park managers. I think that's where the ecosystem-based case comes in, the research around the beneficiaries and the stakeholders. So that's the bottom-up necessity of eventually designing strong finance models. At the same time, top-down, the institutional streams, I think, are where the opportunities lies for the 6 islands as a group.
Thank you so much for that response. And the final question for you that I have is, what are possibilities or recommendations for DCNA in terms of resource mobilization?
I think it should start with designing a resource mobilization strategy. And it's hard for me to say what the contents of that strategy is, because it takes extensive research and analysis of the regional environment. I mean, what kind of donors and CTFs, regional CTFs, do we have operating in the Caribbean region? What governments are interested and investing in the Caribbean region? I'll give one example of the Caribbean Biodiversity Fund, which is also a regional conservation trust fund. Simply, its scope is pretty much the entire Caribbean, and it's financed about 80% by the German Development Bank, by the Nature Conservancy, and also a little bit by the French and Canadian governments. So this is the landscape, the institutional donor landscape that we need to analyze before we can answer that question. But one thing's for sure, a resource mobilization strategy is a helpful tool to get there.
Okay, thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, please give Mr. Arxen Alders an applause of thanks. Thank you so much. We will have a reception at the conclusion of the symposium, and our presenters, with the exception, of course, of Charles, are going to be here. And if there's a question, a burning one that you just have to ask, please feel free to approach them. They'll be more than happy to network with you a little bit. Thank you so much once more, Arxen. Our next and fourth presenter for this afternoon is Dr. Lawrence Jones Walters. Understanding the importance of partnerships for nature-based solutions is very crucial. And our next speaker will present on this subject and on the NL 2021 initiative. Dr. Lawrence is director of the Knowledge-Based Kennis Bastos Program for Nature Inclusive and Landscape within Corporate Strategy and Accounts at Wageningen University and Research in the Netherlands. Please help me welcome Dr. Lawrence Jones Walters to the podium. We will set it for you there, but if you decide to remove it, you're welcome to do that too.
Okay, just one correction, it's NL 2120, not NL 2021.
2020.
Indeed. So thank you for that. Let me just put my props down. So, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, online audience, members of the press, thank you very much for being here, and thank you to DCNA for inviting me. I'm going to tell you a story, but the first thing I have to do is to acknowledge the person that is particularly responsible for this story, and that's Tim van Hatten, who is one of my colleagues back in Wageningen. This is the book he's recently written, which is very much based on the Netherlands 2120 story about what we should do in order to act in relation to climate change. Better? Yeah. And it's time for action. And one of the things he also says is it's not too late for action. And I'll tell you something about that as we go on. Where did that come from? I run a program in Wageningen, which is called Nature Inclusive Transitions. And the idea of that program is that we work with business, industry, other sectors in order to see how they can include nature within the work that they do. And we're not, in that sense, ecologists. We are social scientists, we are economists who bring ecology into this field. And over the last 5 years, we've run something like 60 projects, which you can find at that website there, which are basically about that level of integration. And it's a very interesting area, I have to say, and I can tell you about one of those projects. We've all heard about why we're doing this. And this is a wonderful, Mackay's wonderful illustration of and amusing as well, be sure to wash your hands and everything will be okay. Climate change, biodiversity collapse. What I like about this is that it also has impacted at the highest level. So the G7 in 2020, 2021, gosh, these dates, honestly. Well, it's my own fault as well, yeah. In 2021, in relation to the 2030 Nature Compact, said our world must not only become net zero, but also nature positive for the benefit of both planet and people. And that's at the highest level. This is G7 that has stated this. We have to take notice of this at every level. You can follow that link to find that. I'm sure these PowerPoint presentations will be made available at some point somewhere. So let's start the story. The Netherlands. It's a low-lying country in Northwest Europe, and it is very vulnerable to the impact of climate change. In fact, large parts of the country are below sea level by some meters, as you know, and have been reclaimed from the sea in the past. Nature-based solutions offer, for the Netherlands at least, a number of possibilities. They're resilient and adaptable. So imagine the difference between an area of open mudflat that takes water in it versus a concrete wall to stop the water from coming in. The concrete wall costs millions to build and millions a year to maintain, whereas a mudflat is a natural area, a natural solution to that problem of rising sea level. They do deliver ecosystem services, as we've heard. They're cost effective over time. They are long-term sustainable. They have some aesthetics. This mudflat you can see here has got a few white dots on it, as far as I can tell, which are probably birds, waders. And in fact, you probably know that the Dutch coastline holds an enormous number of birds because it was once a delta. And all those birds used to stop there when they were migrating from north to south, south to north again. It can sequestrate carbon. These aren't my teeth. I'm actually breaking them in for somebody else. It delivers biodiversity conservation, and it has a range of social and community benefits and reduces environmental impact, we hope. This is the French fishing fleet, or part of it. If you go to southern Brittany in France, there is a place where you can find these wonderful ships, beautifully aesthetic, in a kind of dilapidated way, and it represents a failure of our management of ecosystems, because these ships should still be catching fish, and they don't because the fish aren't there anymore, and the fleet has been completely decimated by that. I put that in really just to give you that message. Somebody came to me, so I run that program, and we had a competition for projects in the program, and Tim Van Hattem came to me in 2018, 2019, and basically suggested an idea. He had a 100-year vision for the Netherlands. He had a multidisciplinary approach, which is something else that we want. So he had 15 researchers from 5 institutes, economists, social scientists, a range of others, plant sciences, animal sciences, and so on. And he had an idea about nature-based solutions being the solution for the problems that we're facing in the Netherlands. And his output was a report and a map. Okay, that sounded pretty good. We were convinced. We gave him the money. Not so much, actually. And this is the map he produced. It is all about doing, and this is the Netherlands, by the way, and it's on its side. You don't normally see it like that. But the point is, he was suggesting that we should do things differently. We should look at the Netherlands differently. And although it's not so obvious, what you see here is that there's much more land underwater, and it's much greener than it used to be. Probably most of the people that used to live there are now living in Germany in 100 years' time. But that's just another issue. It had immediate impact. He launched it at the end of December 2019, the report and the map. So effectively it came out on the 1st of January. Nobody was doing anything on the 1st of January, but the 2nd of January, there was no news at that point, 2020. The media picked this up big time. That might just have been coincidence, good luck, but they picked it up and they ran with it. The other thing is, it's about the future, not just now or 2 to 3 years from now. So it gives you breathing space to be able to imagine what could happen. And part of the problem we have, part of the problem that politicians have, for instance, is they have to get things done in a short space of time. That doesn't give you breathing space to have big vision. And this did. And it is a big idea. It's about the whole country and how it could look. And hidden in there, for instance, in order to achieve these nature-based solutions to reduce carbon emissions, for instance, and methane emissions, the proposal was to reduce the number of cows in the Netherlands by half. And you know that the Netherlands is basically about black and white cows. There are several million there. Of course, this wasn't very popular with our animal science researchers because, you know, there's about 2 million cows and there's about 200 science researchers, animal science researchers. They'd have to be reduced to 100 if we only had half the number of cows. So they weren't so happy about that. And what it also had was a highly articulate figurehead, Tim Van Hattem himself, who was able to promote this idea effectively, nicely, and wasn't scared to stand up in front of the media and to talk to them and to take the challenges that he was offered and basically ping them back at him, at the interviewers and the people that were asking these difficult questions. This is Mark Harbers, who was the then Minister of Infrastructure and Water Management in the Netherlands, and he's receiving the report. Have a look. These are my props. There we are. There it is. That's in Dutch. It's also in English. And that's important in terms of communication because this is a big idea. You want it to be available to lots of people. He was very impressed by this, and it has gone right up to the highest level. And I don't know if you heard Frans Timmermans talking recently when he was actually promoting himself as the new leader of D66. What he wants to be. Sorry? No, it's not D66, is it? Yeah, no. That just pinged into my mind. I don't know why. But at the end of his speech, and of course, it's always a bit dangerous for researchers to get too close to politicians because they can be criticized for that. He actually quoted this and said, "I want this report by Wageningen University to plot the future for the Netherlands in the next 100 years," which is pretty good, I think. So it just gives an indication about how an approach can work and how nature-based solutions actually capture the popular imagination. And more recently, we went to Brussels because we produced this, which is imagining a nature-based future for Europe in 2120. And we had 200 people in a big auditorium in Brussels, including politicians, policymakers, basically to promote this idea across Europe. That's probably above regional scale. I don't know. Do you think that's regional scale or above? It's bigger, isn't it? Yeah. So this is the kind of level that we could imagine for nature-based solutions. And if you think about Europe, you think about the glaciers in the Alps, which feed all of the major rivers, the Danube, the Rhine River, any of the big rivers that you can think of, they are disappearing. 2 years ago, when we had a really bad time, the rivers dried out and the river traffic had to stop because it simply couldn't go up and down the rivers. What are we going to do about that? Well, in here are some ideas generated in a participative way to solve that problem. Now, I'm just going to accelerate this one out because I need it next. So we got that response. The ministerial impact, I think, was that we made a proposal to the National Growth Funds, and we achieved a project fund of 120 million to take this forward, of which 70 million became available, 20 million to Wageningen, but also to other universities and institutes within the Netherlands to realize this and upscale it over the coming 10 years. And we've trialed it through the project funding that I manage. We've trialed it at regional level. And what you can see there is a map of the Arnhem region where they're looking at how you can deliver these approaches, nature-based approaches at that level. The people in this room are not nature. They're all the stakeholders. Well, I'm also in that picture, but that's just sort of by the by. So let's very quickly just see why partnerships are important, because this is the second key part of this story. It helps you to address complex and interconnected challenges. You get multiple stakeholders, multiple issues, and no clear solutions. The only way you can address those challenges is by working with other sectors and stakeholders. A bit of biodiversity visiting me here. In terms of problem solving, partnership across sectors allows a more flexible and resilient approach. The solutions are better through partnership. I'm not going to read the whole thing out, but you get it, I think. If we want to scale up, can you imagine we can't do that with the nature sector? We can't do Europe with the nature sector. We can't do the Netherlands with the nature sector alone. We have to work with the other sectors in order to achieve what we want. It is about big scale partnership. And funding and resources as well. Those sorts of partnerships can result in an ability to tap into funds that you would never have thought were available. I actually talked to a hotel owner here 6 weeks ago. I do like it here, by the way. I always come back. And I said, what are you going to do about sea level rise? And he said, well, I think we need to designate the whole of the coast around the island as a marine protected area and plant mangroves on the reef islands and on as much of the coast as possible. This was a hotel owner. He didn't really have much empathy for the biodiversity aspect, but he did see that that biodiversity could offer him a nature-based solution to a coming problem. I found that very interesting. Would he be willing to pay for it? I'm not sure, but it is at least a door that's beginning to open in that sense. And of course, you need to share your knowledge and expertise. I always wanted to be sent off, and I never was. And I've just seen the red card at the back of the room. As you can see, I'm still here, by the way. Policy and regulation. Well, you can see I've been here before because this is a local photograph. We need to work with the policymakers and government in order to get the right policy in place to achieve these things. We heard about how finance can be a basis of policy. In Europe, of course, we worked with landowners for decades with compensation funding in order to convince them or help them to do nature positive work. So these things, and that's legislated for, so that these things do exist. And there's also public awareness and engagement, which is vitally important. Adaptive and resilient solutions. Let me get to the end here. So this is also a Caribbean journey. And the document you can see there, Bonaire 2050, was produced a couple of years ago. There it is. And it was basically a trialing of the NL 2120 approach at island level. It involves stakeholders from across the island, a series of moderated, facilitated meetings where people, actually, you can't see it very well, but they put their ideas on specially made cards on a map of Bonaire. And from that, we were able to determine the kind of thing that they wanted for the future. And the good news is, I think it's very good news actually, is that we started this process 6 or 7 weeks ago in Aruba. And to explore the potential images of future Aruba. The minister was there, he opened the meeting for us and attended the first part of the meeting and saw the kind of thing that we were doing, which is basically to engage with stakeholders from different sectors to come up with that long-term vision, that non-threatening vision through which you can find a better future. And the big news is, looking at WWF at the back there, this week, another document was published, Nature-Based Solutions for Flood Resilience on Bonaire. And this is actually exactly what we're talking about today. And let's think about these kinds of things and possibilities for other islands within the Dutch Caribbean. Okay, I'm going to whiz through the learning points because I think it's important. If you want this to work, you've got to imagine a big idea and you've got to work on longer timescales. You've got to take a whole of society approach. We are just the environment sector is just a stakeholder within this. Okay, so we're not up there. We're not the billy goat on the highest rock. We're there with the rest of the herd in this process. We can drive it, but we have to be part of it in that sense. Communication is critical. It must fit the stakeholder groups. If you're talking to a minister, think about his audience when you talk to him or her. Don't think about what you want to say, just think about what that person needs to say to their audience. Same applies to the finance sector and business. You need to be adaptive and change as you go on. Don't get stuck on ideas. Don't ignore technical solutions because they are still useful. The future isn't only NBS. We also have to rely on the technology we have, which is fantastic, by the way. It's just that NBS offers us something that is more resilient and sustainable but it should be in conjunction. Keep it simple. Partnerships cost time and energy. You have to invest in those, and you have to develop a new skill set. You have to be moderators, facilitators, train yourselves, or employ people who can do this. There is nothing like the vision and power of collective imagination. And just think finally about the cost of doing nothing. Okay? What is the cost of not doing anything? How long? So you think about islands, Dutch islands, they make an offer, don't they? It is an offer. It's about sea, sun, sand in some cases, or maybe other things. How long can you sustain that offer if you don't do something now? What about the investment that has been made in relation to that offer? Can we afford to lose that investment? Can anybody? And just measure that against the benefits of taking action. It's not too late to act. Thank you, Tim. And inclusive partnerships really are, I think, the key to a viable future. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lawrence, for that presentation. Actually, I was hoping there would be no red card because I could just listen to this all afternoon. But hélas,
Yeah.
I'm sure we've got.
You want to sing a song?
Thank you, Lawrence. Judith Brown from the Blue Marine Foundation. That was really interesting, and totally agree with the need for that long-term vision. But with a vision that's 100 years in the future, how do you ensure that people don't use that as an excuse for inaction now? Sure that people, like, how do you then prioritize bite-sized chunks to have tangible, achievable benefits now and in the shorter term to get that longer-term vision?
Actually, that was probably one of the first questions that the press asked Tim van Hattem was, what are you going to do next? And basically, after you've plotted that course to the future, you then have to think about how you're going to get there. And the work that you saw that we're doing at regional level around Arnhem and actually other Dutch provinces is targeted specifically at taking those steps, identifying what they should be, prioritizing them, and then taking them. And that's the key to this. But it's in the context of having that long-term vision. And without that, it's not really clear what you need to do. So we feel very strongly about what we must do now in terms of Aruba or any of the Dutch Caribbean islands. But is that correct in the context of where we want to be in that 100-year time? And it has great relevance for finance, for instance. You know, when you ask for money, it has to be targeted at things that are valuable in terms of where you want to be in that 50 to 100-year timescale. And sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's hobby horses, I have to say. So, yeah.
But was there? Yes. Oh, and also there's one in the back.
Lawrence, I love your little butterflies. You took some here, didn't you?
I did.
Okay. We have this very big elephant in the room that everybody is very politely not talking about here in Aruba, the concept of tourism. And we are in a very fast pace saturating, our entire system with this product. And it's going so fast with so many different directions and impacts and what have you. You've seen it, you know how complex it is. Somehow, when we start to talk about looking 100 years forward, and we don't have everything transparent here on the island. We have different levels. We have those that are known to us and the deals that happen someplace else and then later are made known to us. The transparency is key to planning long term. So we can plan all we want, but as long as other things are going on and other projects are coming and whatever, nothing will adhere to this planning. Secondly, wouldn't 100 years from now encourage people to say, okay, let's put another 10 hotels now fast and we'll see how we'll do this in the, you understand
And I
the
get what you're saying,
opportunistic
yeah.
way? Okay.
So the Bonaire is 2050. That's 30 years. And sometimes that's a better time scale, but it's still long term. And at least if you set out what you want for 2030, then it gives you a picture of what could and couldn't work in terms of that future. And what's interesting is that they've just been reviewing their spatial strategy. And they requested that the consultants that were doing that took that document and used it as the basis for some of the thinking and visioning within the ideas that they wanted to put forward in the spatial strategy for. Is that another red card, isn't it? So it actually had value in terms of thinking about where they want to go spatially. And what I would say is that what we've been doing here when we had the meeting in and the Renaissance actually to think about the vision for Aruba is that it gives you a beacon on the horizon. And it may be that you don't take a straight line to it, but at least it gives you that, and you can reflect on some of the decisions that are being made now in terms of, well, if we make those decisions, what is the cost? And at least, and what is the cost in terms of that vision that we want to achieve? And we're doing, together with the park, we're doing a house-to-house survey of, I think, 2,000 people, 3,000? It's a lot anyway, to get some impression also about what common people want out of this. And at least you have that then as a guiding light, a North Star, if you want. Yeah, and it's better than not having it, I would say. Just one reflection. So if you think about the idea of mangroves, having more mangroves, bringing them back into the reef islands, you can see the fragments of what you used to have. If you look out across the marina and you look at the reef islands there where there used to be mangrove, what are you going to do if you get a storm surge, you get a huge amount of rain, and the sea level has risen this much? Because actually, if you look on Google and you look at what will be sea level rise in the Caribbean, it'll tell you that best case scenario, it'll be about that much. Worst case scenario, you're getting up here somewhere. Imagine a tide on top of that. So this is just the increase in the water level. You imagine a tide, a tidal and a surge from a storm, and you've got water coming down from the hills and the mountains where basically the rain's coming in. What are you going to do about that? Well, actually, there isn't much you can do with concrete to solve that problem, but you could look at what are the natural attributes of the coastal landscape there that you could use, for instance, to absorb some of that water. Salinas, for instance, you have. That is one possibility. But if you just choose that from an engineering point of view, it will not give you a nature-based solution. It'll just give you a few more holes in the ground. So the idea might be to deepen those. If you bring in tourism, ecology, bird watching, you might say, yes, deepen them, have more permanent water, and see what happens to the bird populations, because we all know that on this island, if you've got water, you just get more birds. Can that be an opportunity for tourism as well? But you can't do that without involving the archaeologists, because Malmok has got the First Nations remains in it. So you're already involving maybe Deove, you've got probably the Bubali people to involve. You've got the archaeologists, the ecologists, the hotels, and so on. So that partnership is then what delivers you a nature-based solution that may actually help with some of these future problems.
Thank you, Lawrence. In short, it is not too late to act. Ladies and gentlemen, please give Lawrence our thanks. I did notice there was a young lady in the back who had a question. Maybe she can get with you during this break or during the reception. There was also a question online, which I will humbly ask you if maybe you can get with Nina or one of our other staff members so that we can answer that question online would be great. Thank you so much. We will take a short break now, and I'm kindly asking everyone to be back in the room at 3:55 in order for us to prepare for the arrival of Princess Beatrix. She will be here and entering the room at 4. Kindly come back in a timely manner. Thank you so much, everyone. If we can close the back doors so that we may proceed. I would now like to invite Mr. Arno Verhoeven to come forward and to officially welcome Her Royal Highness.
Thank you. On behalf of FPNA and DCNA, a very warm welcome, Your Royal Highness. We hope your visits to the island has been pleasant so far. You have always been a strong and dedicated supporter of conservation on the Dutch Caribbean islands. We are very grateful for your involvement. And as our patron, we are very honored to have you here again. In the first part of the event, we had presentations about what nature-based solutions are, what challenges we face, the cost of it, and how we can find partnerships. In the next part, we have some more presentations. We have a very nice video about by Aruban artist Armando Goedgedrag. And we have a closing speech, and we have honored by Minister Ursula Arends of Aruba. And I wish you and Your Highness and all of you an inspiring continuation of our event.
Thank you, Arno. We've heard so much today about the importance of protecting, preserving, and restoring nature, not just here in Aruba, but throughout the Dutch Caribbean and beyond. Nature moves people, it inspires us, and it fuses people with creativity. And one such person is a well-known painter and multimedia artist, Armando Goedgedrag. We are now going to see how nature moves Armando. If our technical team could please cue the video, and if everyone will please turn your attention to this video presentation of Armando and his work. Thank you.
Aruba nada está perfecto. Maneira com o ambiente também tem Ormi bij de naturaleza het donami rust. Dan vooral inspiração, su color nan shapes nan. Na Aruba nada está perfecto. Maneira com o ambiente também dingen maten aan de forma hopi de manera slordig, pero toch hopi bonito y único. Looking at the birds or just sunrise and sunset and being around the trees, so it's something definitely that has impacted me way more than I thought. So in short, my heart belongs in Aruba. Ito ay manera kung ilusta kay riba objekto nang nekas ke mata nang NBS nang de separa nang. Essa é a inspiração mais hopi mes. Me gusta capturar essa aí para mim com minha câmera para depois me pôr pinta essa aqui também. So when I take the photo, I use it as a reference image. I study it very well, and then I go to the canvas and start painting what I took that day. I always try to find a way how to either express my feelings and emotions when I make a painting or take even the photos or video. It's pretty amazing to see when a sea turtle comes up and swims near you. They always go up for some air. And yeah, it's just the colors of the green sea turtle that I really like. They have like a nice orange, bit of purple. Since the water is very nice and blue, and also in the early morning or the late afternoon, you can get nice sun rays going through the water. It's something very magical.
Sa kita onde trutuga na grande como é que waki na trestrapi. É, vou pôr com bonita natureza tá em seu espaço. Vai ser que tiki boa.
I do believe that my artwork brings a lot of appreciation and awareness for the wildlife here in Aruba, because it can bring you a lot of peace and a sense of freedom, and also be grateful for everything we have on this island, because Aruba is small, as we know, but it has so much to offer. The deep sea to the waves, and then you go from land, you have different types of rocks. We have so many beaches, beautiful crystal clear waters, and the big rough sea. I love this island. It's amazing. Most people come outside of Aruba to live in Aruba, so because I was bullied a lot at school, I often felt like an outsider, even though I did feel at home here. So my point that I wanted to make with the flowers on the wall is that all flowers, when you look at them, people will say, yeah, those are flowers from Aruba. But the truth is they're not native. So my point is that we are all locals here. Each flower represents a tradition, a different culture. It reflects our island, our people. That's why it's called the melting pot. So what I'm painting here is the Lora. I vaguely remember when I was a teenager, I used to see them fly a lot. There were flocks flying. I'm excited to draw this bird because it has very nice colors, a lot of vibrant green tones, and also very nice yellow feathers. And it's a bird, I've never actually painted this bird, so I'm excited to finally be able to work on it. Hopefully we're gonna see them again reintroduced, but time will tell. My name is Armando Goedgedrag. I'm a painter and also a multimedia specialist, and I'm mostly being inspired by nature.
Thank you so much to Armando. There's feedback here. Thank you so much. Thank you to Armando for sharing with us a little bit about how nature inspires him. And Armando is on the grounds here at the university, and you will have an opportunity to meet him later on during the reception. I would now like to call back to the podium Arno Verhoeven, and he's going to speak to us a little bit more on DCNA's involvement with nature. I'd now like to also ask our park directors to please take your places on stage. Arno, the stage is yours.
The next slide. Thank you. I can also recommend the art of Armando in the San Nicolas, the beautiful murals. So if you have a chance, go there. Before we are going to have a panel discussion with the park directors, I would like to share some examples of nature-based solutions and insights from our network. For the last 25 years, our Alliance of Six Islands has been working together to support each other and to safeguard nature in the Dutch Caribbean. Our credo is nature knows no boundaries, and nature is what we always have in common. It unites us. Sharing knowledge is at the heart of this cooperation. Every island is different, and every island has different strategies, but sharing these means that we can learn from each other's successes and failures, and together we know more. Together we can do more, and together we can make a difference. This will lead to best practices. It prevents us from reinventing the wheel again and again, and it ensures the efficient allocation of resources. So let's go through a couple of projects from our network. On Sint Eustatius, or Statia, they're not just planting trees, they are bringing together the whole community to restore the ecosystem, make agriculture sustainable, add a touch of landscaping for beautiness, and get everyone involved. Thank you. Thank you. In other project on Statia, they are dealing with invasive species control, especially focusing on the bridled quail dove. This dove is iconic for Statia. Statia's tropical dry forest is endangered and is facing some serious threats from invasives like goats. In this project, they are actively eradicating the invasives. They are protecting and reviving the crucial habitats for the bridled quail dove, making the dove an indicator for success of nature-based solutions. On Curaçao, a native plant nursery has been built. It's not just a nursery, it is a hub of discovery. They're not just growing local plants, they're also conducting research there. They want to know more about a seed's transformation into a resilient young plant and how to get the perfect conditions for this. Another project on Curaçao is Agua por Curaçao. Here they're bringing historical wells and dry riverbeds, oil, and dam structures back to life. This improves groundwater levels, agriculture, and it prevents erosion. Let's go to beautiful Seba, where they have the Relief Seba project. In this project, they are not focusing on planting more trees, but more on restoring a variety of species, increasing biodiversity. On Bonaire, hundreds of buttonwoods have been planted, preventing sediments from reaching the delicate mangrove area just behind it. The area is fenced off against grazers as goats, such as goats, protecting the newly planted trees. That this reforestation is now expanded with the introduction of other plants like the manzanilla. We also see coral restoration in the Caribbean. Over the years, coral reefs have seen significant decline in health and in abundance. Across all 6 islands, coral restoration initiatives are taking place. There is a plethora of projects focusing on different species like stony corals, diadema sea urchins, and reef fish. In these projects, the parks and universities and other organizations are working hard to restore this beauty and resilience of our coral ecosystems. Oh, missing one. One slide missing. On St. Martin, that one is missing, I see. On St. Martin, they're going for a different angle. They're going for a strategic plan, strategic game plan with their Corina and coastal ecosystem habitat mapping. On this island, unfortunately, there is an absence of policies for nature-based restoration. Therefore, they are trying to take a more proactive stance instead of diving headfirst into solutions. Through data collection and by getting better understanding of the environment, they aim to support local governance and to let them make better decisions. On Aruba and on Bonaire, major mangrove restoration projects are taking place. Over there, the mangroves are struggling due to sedimentation. This reduces water depth, comprises water quality, and puts the mangroves at risk and disrupting vital roles as a habitat for young species and other animals like young fish. On both islands, sediment traps and the reopening of channels takes place, and this restores water flow and water circulation. And on Bonaire, I'm forgetting almost, on Bonaire, also 4,000 young mangrove saplings have been outplanted along the southwest coast. That's here. And this will help to increase biodiversity and strengthen the coastal area, make it more resilient against the effects of climate change and more extreme weather conditions. So let's look at some insights from our network and how to move forward. First off, the success of these solutions require robust, and it's said before, local policies. They are often still lacking, not good enough, or missing a dedicated follow-up. In many cases, nature-based solutions also take quite some time. A tree needs to grow. And it can take a whole generation and sometimes sometimes 2 generations to make it a forest. Also, engaging local communities in active participation is quite a challenge. Questions arise from local stakeholders and governments about the speed of change and the short-term benefits to their daily lives and businesses. In many cases, it is seen as a threat or not important enough. It is very important to involve as many stakeholders possible. Community outreach and awareness is key for the projects to succeed. This requires an effort of everybody. Think of science, education, businesses, governments, and of course the local populations. As mentioned before, roaming animals and invasive species are a real threat for ecosystems and its reforestation. When restoring ecosystems, you always have to be aware of invasives, plants, animals. For example, when planting trees, you also have to think about how to protect them against free roaming grazers. They can easily and literally eat your project. So next, and it's mentioned in a presentation today, securing long-term funding remains a real challenge. Funding is still too ad hoc and limited on all islands. And unfortunately, within our alliance, we also see differences in opportunities for funding due to our 4 countries within a kingdom situation. Some islands have more opportunities than others. We urge the kingdom and all islands to keep on working together to tackle our joint challenges. Nature-based solutions often are pioneering work, pushing boundaries of what is known. Therefore, we need more research. It is essential. More and better data will help all stakeholders to get a better picture and make better decisions or make decisions. And finally, prevention is better than cure. Nature-based solutions can help us deal with many challenges, but more sustainable use and management of our natural resources is better. After all, you don't need a solution if there is no problem. But nature nature-based solutions, although a priority, are not a holy grail. They do not dismiss other solutions. Many other solutions, maybe not that sexy, can be effective. So we need to accept that as well and try to go for combinations or integrations. So by having us all here together, we hope to inspire you to work with us, to join us on our journey to safeguard nature. And I'd love to introduce now my fellow colleagues. Tyson Lopez of Aruba, Leslie Hickerson of Sint Maarten, Paul Stokkemans of Curaçao, Kai Wolf from Seba, and Erik Borman from Statia. And let's now continue our discussion.
Thank you so much for presenting our Dutch Caribbean islands. And thank you to all of our park directors who are present with us on stage. We wanted to give an opportunity to our park directors to also address our audience and our participants this afternoon. And I have a few questions, one for each of them, just one for each of them. I would like to start with Leslie, the sole female on the panel. There you go. This way everybody can see your photos too. So Leslie, research and monitoring are important to better understand how to introduce nature-based solutions. My question is, what is St. Maarten currently doing with regards to research, and what do you hope to achieve from this?
Thank you so much for the question. In St. Maarten, we are currently concentrating our efforts on baseline data collection to support future nature-based solutions. One very good example of this is our Carina project, which is the Coastal Resilience Needs Assessment. The Carina project is a joint project with the Ministry of Romy of St. Maarten and my organization, the Nature Foundation, and it's supported by the Rejuvenate funding program. Currently, the Rejuvenate team and the Carina team are collecting baseline data to create habitat maps of our marine environment. We'll combine these habitat maps with other project deliverables like a risk and vulnerability assessment, a terrestrial biodiversity study, as part of a larger spatial planning exercise. Once we have that data, the government can use the spatial planning exercise to rethink ocean use and protections of St. Maarten. The Nature Foundation will also be better equipped to provide support for spatial planning and for policy support towards nature-based solutions for our island. Only once we have this data and we've done the comprehensive research can we ensure that nature-based solutions on St. Maarten can be implemented effectively and sustainably for our future.
Wow, thank you so much. Oh, yes. When all else fails, go to the wired microphone. That's what I say. All right. The impact of restoration is an important part of a project, but this can be resource intensive. Could you explain how you will be using the bridled quail dove as a performance indicator for the restoration's effectiveness of Statia or St. Eustatius's forest restoration project?
Thank you very much for the question. So the bridled quail dove is an endangered species, endemic species, and its well-being is tied to the state of its native habitat, the forest ecosystem. So by understanding or measuring the bridled quail dove's well-being, we can gauge the health of the forest ecosystem. And we do this by monitoring and tracking population population of the Breda quail dove to get a direct insight into how our restoration efforts are actually impacting the species and thus how well we are able to improve the habitat. And although it is labor intensive to track the species population level and also for other patterns, it allows us to get the data we need to really measure how effective our restoration efforts are, our invasive species management, and then make adjustments if necessary. And yeah, that's how we do it.
Okay, thank you so much to Eric. Our next question is addressed to Tyson. Coral restoration can have many positive impacts, both for nature, climate, economy, and for society. How would the current coral restoration project of Aruba contribute to benefit the economy?
All right. I must first say that we are in nature business, so we focus always on biodiversity first. But indeed, coral restoration, it's just not planting corals, but policies needs to be in place. You have to manage the area accordingly. But it can have a huge spin-off on economic factors. You can say about recreational aspects, so diving, but also fishing. So you can also measure the fish, the amount of biomass and amount of how much you would be able to sell it. So it's a spin-off of how you're using nature in order to enhance and get a better positive impact or output for economy. But I must say again, it is difficult because it's not just planting corals. It's not a 1, 2, 3 step. A lot of factors need to be in place for this.
Yes, understood, understood. Okay, thank you so much for that. Hi, my next question will be directed to you. Human and financial resources can be limited. For this, collaboration and funding diversification is important.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Michelle. That's an easy question.
That's what you're doing. What is SEBA currently doing for diversifying the streams of income, and how collaboration between the islands can help with capacity?
Okay, that's not just an important question, it's an essential question. And looking at SEBA as being the smallest island in the Dutch Caribbean, it's close to the largest marine park, not just in the Dutch Caribbean, but the entire Dutch kingdom, the SEBA Bank. So given the small size of SEBA, we still don't have the tourism level that the ABC islands have, and that applies to all the other islands here in the SSS in the northern part of the Caribbean. So we have limited potential to generate income from the traditional means like user fees, taxes, so to say. So we presently are shifting our focus towards research, since the SEBA Bank, for example, is highly under-researched, so to say. We're promoting research and trying to attract researchers to come to our area. And we provide the logistics, we provide the human resources to help them achieving their studies. So that's one part, and there are others, of course. What the beauty of the DCNA is that we have a network that has accumulated a vast amount of resources which can be pooled and which can be shared. That is not just expertise, but it could also be shared financial advice, accounting, for example. It could also be services like legal services, which we are sometimes often need, unfortunately. And that would be prohibitive for a small park like us, and having access to that on a level which is where everybody is putting into a pool. Pooling resources are much more efficient and thereby very cost effective. So that's a big advantage of our network, the DCNA. Thanks.
No.
Seba is, after all, the unspoiled queen of the Caribbean, is she not? Yes. All righty then. So Paul, we have a question for you. Aside from restoration, nature-based solutions can also contribute to mitigate the impacts of climate change. How will the watershed management project you are working on contribute to mitigating the impacts of climate change?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the question. Suppose you go to the bank and you get some money, 100 guilder bills, or 25 or 50. You go home, you put it on the table, you open the window, and then the wind comes and the wind starts, blowing your money out of the window. What do? You close the window. That's, we don't want to lose our capital. But what do we do with our rainwater capital? We move it to the sea as fast as we can to get rid of it. We don't let the rainwater penetrate in the soil and benefit nature. Now, in the future, because of climate change, the climate is getting hotter. Hot air holds more water. When the air holds more water, when you get a rain shower, it will be more intense. More water will come down in a shorter period of time. Yeah. If that comes down, the soil cannot absorb it anymore. It will go to the sea. So the problem we already have will be exacerbated by climate change. So we are managing the Christoffel Park. In the Christoffel Park, it's an old plantation area. You have a lot of dams, old plantation dams, actually dam systems, because they start upstream as smaller dams, bigger dams, bigger dams, bigger dams. So they're not functioning anymore. They are, they are actually to some extent ruins. So we're going to renovate them and bring back the old function to stop the water, have the water penetrate in the soil and benefit nature.
Wow, thank you so much. Thank you so much for that response. I would like now to have Arno take the microphone, as if you haven't spoken enough this afternoon. But having heard what the leaders within the conservation world of each island are currently doing and their needs, how will DCNA move forward with supporting the organizations with implementation of nature-based solutions for restoration in each island?
Well, first, we are an alliance. So we support each other. We work together for already 25 years. In our new strategy, we will also set up long-term programs, themes in areas where we think we can actually make a difference. It was said today as well, you have to make choices where you can make that difference with the limited resources you have. So collectively, we are going to set goals, what we want to achieve in our region. And then this will be translated by the parks in targets for their islands. And in all of our programs, I'm quite sure that we will find nature-based solutions. So yes, we will support through these programs with funding, with knowledge sharing, with building capacity, and like today, teaming up, reaching out to stakeholders to join us in that effort to protect our living environment and to help us safeguard nature in the Dutch Caribbean.
Very good. Thank you, Arno. It's all about collaboration. That's why we're here. Thank you so much. Thank you to Arno and to all of our park directors, not just for what they do and what they've done to get us here today, but what they do with passion and with love every day. Thank you to each of you. Thank you. We will transition now to the speaker before the last for this afternoon, but she is our closing keynote speaker. We will not have a question and answer portion after her presentation. However, you are welcome to approach her during the reception. Our final speaker for today is Professor Jacinta Ellers. She is a professor of evolutionary ecology, head of Department of Ecological Science, and director of Amsterdam Institute for Life and Environment. Professor Jacinta will share some lessons learned from this symposium, and she will talk a little on how the Dutch Caribbean islands should move forward with the implementation of nature-based solutions. Please welcome Professor Jacinta Ellers.
So it's a great pleasure to be here and to see so many of you live after having many online meetings with you all. And I'm really honored to be able to address you as the closing keynote. And I will try to put together some of the lessons learned during this symposium and point out future directions to make the promise of nature-based solutions come true. But first, I would like to take a step back and look at how our perspective on nature conservation has changed over time. And this is important because the success of nature-based solutions is a fundamental shift in what nature means to us. And we've heard that in multiple talks today. So for most of the 20th century, it was believed that nature conservation would be best achieved if we would close off our protected areas completely to all human activities, so nature for itself. And then at the start of this century, our perspective shifted to a more economic one. Nature for people, and in which nature was seen to provide valuable services, ecosystem services for humans. And although this view was important because it made people aware that nature had economic value, it did not stop the degradation of nature. Can you hear me? Is the mic right? Okay, yeah. It did not stop the degradation of nature. And the reason for that was that nature for people doesn't consider that when you take from nature, you also have to give back to nature. And this is how we arrived at a new paradigm, people and nature, in which the interdependency between people and nature is emphasized. So this perspective recognizes that nature plays a critical role in meeting our societal needs, and that's particularly the case on small islands. But it also emphasizes that we need to invest back in nature in order to maintain and restore natural health. And this is what we call nature-based solutions. If we give space to nature and if we take care of nature, we can also employ nature for societal challenges that we find important. And particularly in the Caribbean islands, there is a high dependency on the natural resources, for example, for economic growth, including tourism-based revenues for livelihoods. And we should not forget the formidable challenge that the islands are facing in the light of climate change. Nature-based solutions are a crucial part of a strategy to protect the islands against the consequences of climate change. And although the islands are too small to make a significant impact in climate change reduction, implementing nature-based solutions will help to mitigate the devastating effect of climate change on the islands. So investing in nature-based solutions that can generate societal and biodiversity benefits by restoring and recreating ecosystems. And here on the slide, you see one of the examples here on Aruba, where a wetland was created that was able to purify the wastewater from the nearby hotels. It has proven to become a fantastic bird sanctuary. Well, at the same time, also improving human and environmental health because it is purifying the wastewater. However, it also illustrates that nature-based solutions are not for free. And maybe this is an unpopular thing to say, but I think it's true. So continued investments are necessary in nature-based solutions. And Bubali is a good example of that because the waterways are being clogged up by water plants, which need to be removed regularly. The hotel sector is expanding, and that means that the capacity of the wetland should be increased. So we should see nature-based solutions as a long-term investment in nature. And the sustainable financial models that Arxen presented in his presentation earlier are absolutely crucial to do this successfully. Now, I want to debunk another misconception about nature-based solutions. You may think that nature-based solutions are easy solutions. Well, they are not. Nature is a powerful tool, and it can address many of our societal challenges. But of course, we cannot just use nature to justify any damage that we do to the environment and to compensate for that. Nature-based solutions can reverse the process of ecological degradation, and they can restore ecosystem services, but the natural resources on the islands are limited, right? So nature-based solutions cannot increase the natural resources that are there, and therefore they can also not facilitate unlimited economic growth. And so nature-based solutions work best if they go hand in hand with sustainable choices that take into account the carrying capacity of the islands. Okay, given that context, let's get more practical and look ahead. What is needed to make nature-based solutions a success? What can we learn from the projects that are already ongoing? And can we perhaps avoid any of the mistakes they may have made? For that, we need a framework that provides guidelines for the design, the verification, and the scaling up of nature-based solutions. And the IUCN has been doing fantastic work in describing such a framework. And as we've heard in the talk of Charles this morning, the IUCN global standards for best practice of nature-based solution are based on 8 sets of indicators that describe best practice for nature-based solutions. Well, of course, I'm not going to repeat them all. You'll be totally bored, but I am going to account to you 3 of the main messages of that whole document that I think is most relevant for the Caribbean situation. And the first of those points is the importance of evidence-based knowledge generation and knowledge sharing. So as we heard from Arno in the previous session, there are already so many existing projects going on. And whether these projects are run by volunteers or by park staff, all of these projects generate valuable knowledge, experience, data, and we can use all of that to help next projects, future projects, to not have to reinvent the wheel. And let's not forget the contribution that scientists can make to nature-based solutions. They can share and they can employ their ecological, economic, and social knowledge to improve nature-based solutions. And so what is important is that we build an open access scientific knowledge base that aligns the best practices and that can help all of the nature-based projects that are coming up. And of course, an organization like the DCNA would be excellently equipped to coordinate and manage such a database. Well, the second main point I would like to make is that the importance of prioritizing community values, community needs, and capabilities. And we've heard in the talk of Lawrence how important partnerships are. And I think the community is a very important partner in these nature-based solutions. We know that nature-based solutions work best when there is a high community engagement, and that can be achieved if their goals are aligned with local community values. And here on Aruba, for example, the call for no more hotels reflects a sentiment from a growing group of the local community. And in this, we should realize that that call could come from the realization that nature-based solutions provides diverse benefits, and not everybody prioritize or evaluates these benefits equally. And so this really emphasizes the necessity to put effort and take care in making sure that the local community is actually not harmed or displaced by implementing these nature-based solutions. And finally, the third point I would like to drive home is the importance of robust monitoring and evaluation programs. In the Netherlands, we have a saying, meten is weten, and you translate that as measuring is knowing. And it's important to know, so we should measure. And so we should measure how well our interventions that we put in these projects, how well they are doing, right? And therefore we need to design some sort of, I would call it a dashboard, that at one glance shows us whether this project is meeting all the societal challenges that we intended it to do. And so biodiversity, economic use, human health, whatever the project is designed to do. And this way, we can compare the state of nature before the project and after the project and see how well these interventions work. If they work well, we can use them to convince other people to also use nature-based solutions. And if some of the benefits are lagging behind, then we can use that to improve the project. Interestingly, such a dashboard can be used for a single project to see how it's doing, but it can also work on a larger scale, right? And show the cumulative effect of many nature-based solution projects on an island to see where the island may still be lacking a little bit of incentive in one of these societal challenges. As I highlighted at the start of the talk and was already mentioned in many of the previous talks, we need a shift in our perspective on nature. Summarizing everything we have heard today, I think the shift is coming, and small islands are actually excellently positioned to become frontrunners in nature-based solutions. Not only do they have small communities, which would facilitate this participation of the local community, but also I feel that the momentum and awareness of the urgency of nature-based solutions is much higher on islands than elsewhere. And finally, the high interconnectedness of processes on the islands makes that relatively small interventions can have large and direct impacts on the environment. So, where to start? I'm now going to disagree slightly with Lawrence's talk because he had a time frame of 100 years. And I think there is no time to waste. We should start now. So from my perspective, in the past years, I've been developing an approach together with many organizations on the different islands, and many of you are here today, actually. And this approach has a couple of key ingredients that would allow us to start really quickly. Our idea is to start from existing projects. As we've seen in Arno's overview, there are already so many, a plethora of initiatives, he said, going on, right? I don't think we need more initiatives, and also giving the capacity of people to staff these initiatives, that is probably not feasible. So why don't we strengthen these initiatives? Why don't we improve them? And then we can have really quick benefits. That would be the low-hanging fruit. And the other element I think is crucial is what we call a living lab approach. Well, that is actually an approach that engages stakeholders, but importantly, makes them work together with scientists, with researchers. So in a living lab approach, you have two cycles, the societal cycle and the research cycle, but these meet, these form an integrated unity of research-based and co-creation with the stakeholders. And the questions that the societal stakeholders have feed into the research, and the researchers then feed in their solutions into the societal cycle to make sure that actually this brings scientific answers to real societal problems and that they can really use. And in this way, this is a joint trajectory towards multi-perspective community-supported solutions. And with the shared goal defined, then we can start to think about which steps do we need to really reach that goal. Of course, there's a larger goal, but there are many, many smaller steps that each of the stakeholders can take to, in the end, reach that larger goal. And during the week, the only week, unfortunately, that I was here on the island, I have met so many knowledgeable, enthusiastic, and committed people that I feel there is really the capacity to meet all these smaller steps and work towards this larger goal. And just to close off, I want to share with you a saying that one of these people I met shared with me. And the saying is about how you reach your goals on the islands. And so it goes as follows. If you see a possibility and you want to realize that on the islands, you don't kick in the door because it will slam right back into your face. What you do is you lean against that door. And if you lean long enough, that door will open a little bit and give you finally the opportunity to realize your possibilities. And what I would like to say is that we, all those committed and enthusiastic people, we should lean against that door of nature-based solutions. We should lean with all of our weight, with the whole community and all these stakeholders. And then the door will open and it will make us realize the possibility of a more resilient island society and ecology through effective nature-based solutions. Thank you.
Professor Ellers, indeed, in the Dutch Caribbean, our islands are small, but we are mighty. And we also believe in pursuing what is important for not just for one of us, but for all of us. And I am confident that after the symposium, we will see more action being taken in this area of nature-based solutions. Thank you so much for sharing with us this afternoon. Thank you once more. I would now like to invite our final speaker for this afternoon, who is going to close us out. And he is the individual who is tasked with environment and nature affairs for the island of Aruba. He's the Minister of Transport, Integrity, Nature, and Elderly Affairs. His name is Mr. Ursel Adams, and the virtual as well as the in-person podium is now yours, sir. Minister Ursel Adams, everyone.
It's not to Ursula Adams, that's Juliette. She's my senior policy advisor on nature. Your Royal Highness, Princess Beatrix, Your Excellency Governor Boekhout, Your Excellency Prime Minister Waver Cruz, distinguished guests, a splendid afternoon. It is my sincere honor and deepest delight to engage and share some thoughts on this DCNA symposium. I extend my sincere appreciation to both the Dutch Caribbean Nature Alliance and Fundacion Parke Nacional Aruba for organizing this symposium. Fostering knowledge exchange and actions on nature-based solutions across the Dutch Caribbean islands. I would like to take a moment to ask each of you to look around the room and go ahead, don't be shy. Look at the people surrounding you today. All of us here today are graced to be in a room full of nature lovers. Recognize your peers that work tirelessly to advance nature's role in our societies. We might be outnumbered out there, but as Emerson once said, we must adopt the pace of nature. Her secret is patience. And if there is one skill we might all share in our love for nature, it is that of patience. Patience to represent nature, patience to preserve nature, and patience to conserve nature, patience to persevere, and patience to evolve, and the patience to enjoy all that nature offers. The need for nature preservation initiatives to promote conservation and regeneration has never been more urgent. Aruba has several laws and policies aimed at nature conservation and is party to the international treaties as part of the Kingdom of the Netherlands. The Ramsar Convention on Wetlands is one such convention for the international recognition of wetlands and their ecological function. Until recently, the Spanish Lagoon was the only wetland with this status. In emphasizing the value of biodiversity and ecosystems in nature-based solutions, I'm extremely proud to announce that Aruba is expanding the number of protected areas under the Ramsar Accord. This will now include the Western wetland systems consisting of 5 wetlands. Additionally, the southern coast and the eastern and western points of Aruba will also be designated as Ramsar areas. The Ramsar status provides protection without interference to economic activities, yet with the condition of damage reduction and nature restoration. In case of unavoidable damage, it provides us all, as stakeholders within nature, with the practical tools to enhance its protection by reasonably managing our economic and similar activities. To mention a few examples of nature treasures in these areas, Aruba's eastern point is spread with reef islands acting as breeding ground for 10 tern species. Aruba's southern coast is a shark birding place. Aruba's western point is a rest area for marine mammals and holds Aruba only surviving endangered coral colonies. Aruba's western wetlands is known for being the largest important bird area, also known as IBA, in Aruba with numerous species of migratory birds. The wetlands also provide flood protection and high potential for economic or ecosystem restorations. In achieving the Ramsar status for these additional regions of Aruba, I extend my heartfelt nature-embracing thank you to FPNA, DNM, Tortuga Aruba, Aruba BirdLife Conservation, Aruba Marine Mammal Foundation, and Wageningen University. I was delighted and humbled to collaborate to achieve this nature-based milestone together. Just like nature is transboundary, it is crucial for us to work together within the Dutch Caribbean. After all, our ocean is shared, or in the words of their deepest, highest, Sylvia Earle, no water, no life, no blue, no green. In this spirit, I have a dream and determination to develop an ABC-wide hope spot led by Mission Blue and in collaboration with many other on the ground here today, also in Curaçao and Bonaire. This is an ambitious and strategic target. It allows us to create a platform for collaboration based on science and data. An ABC Hope Spot also serves to remove barriers for commitment toward higher protection of our shared sea. Applying marine spatial planning as a tool, we can work together toward responsible use and management of our ocean, including marine protected areas, and thereby truly nurturing nature-based solutions. From the perspective of my ministry, exploring the potential for an ABC Hope Spot is top priority for 2024. We have consensus of the FPNA and also of the DNM, the Directorate of Nature and Environment. I look forward to formally kickstarting this process amongst our local stakeholders, as well as our sister islands, in securing everyone's commitment in this process so that the real work can start. Let us all continue to have the patience to represent, preserve, and conserve, and persevere on behalf and for nature. Evolve with nature without forgetting the patience to enjoy all that nature has to offer. Nature nurtures. It is time for us to nurture nature. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much to Minister Arons. As you heard, when he speaks on the topic of nature and environment, he does so with passion because it's a topic that's extremely important and near to his heart. Thank you so much for leading this charge. I would now like to ask Arno if you can come forward. We do have a small token of appreciation that we would like to present to Princess Beatrix, and Arno will do the presenting. You can step down here. I will explain a little bit about what it is. It is a it is a painting that was made by Armando Goedgedrag, whom all of you saw a video of Armando painting earlier today. He painted Alora. FPNA has been hard at work to soon reintroduce this endemic and extinct species in Aruba. And we wanted to say to the princess and other valued nature partners that we appreciate your presence this afternoon to the symposium and the time you've spent in Aruba. Our partners had the honor to get up close to the loras this morning and to learn more about this project. Armando will be outside in the courtyard and he will be painting during the reception. Please feel free to stop by and see him as he does his work. Thank you so much, Arno, for presenting that token of appreciation. And thank you, Princess. I will ask everyone in the room to please remain seated once I've concluded the program to allow for Princess as well as the governor and our prime minister to exit the auditorium first. We want to simply say thank you to all of you, everyone who has taken time to be part of the symposium this afternoon. Our participants in the room, our participants who joined us virtually. Of course, when you have individuals such as these that are seated in front of you, not just from one island, but from all representations in the Dutch Caribbean, it's because the topic, the subject is an important one for all of us. And so we thank you, all of our distinguished and invited guests, for accepting our invitation and for being here. We also would like to thank our stakeholders and all other collaborators, the University of Aruba, for opening your doors to us. Thank you so much. Our symposium sponsors, Milton Harms in cooperation with Prins Bernhard Cultuurfonds Caribisch Gebied, representation of the Netherlands in Oranjestad, the Aruba Tourism Authority, Grant Thornton Aruba, and Bonaire, and big and special thanks to DCNA and to FPNA's organizing team. I've been asked to specifically thank a few individuals, Tyson Lopez, Adeline van den Berg, Emery Martha Newman, and Nina Zander. We could not have done this without you, and this symposium has now come to an end. Thank you all so much. If everyone will please remain seated, and we will allow for Princess Beatrix, her entourage, the Governor of Aruba, the Prime Minister of Aruba, and our ministers to first exit the auditorium. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the reception.